All right, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, co-presented by RPI Consultants and Kofax. This is our new solutions for the new normal, keep business moving with a remote workforce. You know, with the public health crisis going on today, there's having to rapidly change the way that we do business today. And we have some solutions and some tools that we could probably help with that. They want to talk about this from a high level and show you how, from a macro to a micro level, how this impacts us today. Today we're joined by Chris Huff, the Chief Strategy Officer from Kofax, Geoff Lilienfeld, partner at RPI Consultants, and myself, Chad Tucker. So today we're going to talk about meeting the new challenges of today, solutions for today and beyond. We're going to quickly talk about a case study of AP automation with Resoft Online and take some time to take questions. With that, Chris, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you and take it over, sir.
All right. Hey, appreciate it, Chad. So maybe before we jump in, just want to acknowledge that. So what we're going to talk about is a challenging topic because there's very much a human element to this. So before we jump into any of this business-related stuff on a personal level, just wanted to hope that everybody is listening, that you and your family is safe, healthy, and that you're able to make the most of the time that we're spending together with our families. I think a lot of life tends to get in the way and pull us in different directions over time, and so now is really a time to reconnect, if you will, maybe to establish some of those bonds that have sort of weakened over time. But where we wanted to start was on the next slide, starting at a macro level in terms of what's shaping up in the global environment and some of the pressures that businesses are feeling, and that we as a global intelligent automation company at Kofax, what we're seeing across the globe. And I was sharing with Chad right before we started this that we just wrapped up our Americas and EMEA Customer Strategic Advisory Board right before I jumped on this call. And they are feeling the same pressures regardless of region, and it's a very cross-vertical advisory board. So, and these are very, very senior executives. So I think what we're going to talk about here very much just pressure tested it with a cross-functional global community of executive leaders that are looking at these kinds of issues and also looking for solutions. And so I think that this content is going to be extremely relevant. What you see here is basically an attempt to paint a picture of a very, very complicated environment, and that is one that is rapidly changing. But what you notice here is as you move left to right across the time element and you advance through the different ages into the intelligence age, what you start to see is that innovation more today than ever is driven by software innovation and less by hardware innovation. So there's more and more software going on to fewer and fewer pieces of hardware. And so that this parabolic upswing that you see is because software can scale much, much quicker than hardware. And because we've got a lot more software than hardware, we're seeing that the environment is changing that much quicker. And Chad, if you can pop in, I think there are 4 bullets here. There we go. So we see this accelerated rate of change really driving a tremendous amount of disruption. And this disruption, again, spans industries. I was just with the CIO of UPS, dual-hatted as the CIO of Coyote Logistics as well, UPS company. Their primary competitive threat right now is not FedEx, is not even Amazon. Their primary, it's not DHL, their primary competitive threat right now is Uber Freight. And it's because Uber's using a platform of technologies to have the same, if not greater, impact and reach that UPS had previously had throughout decades of experience. And so you're starting to see a lot of disruption within industries that some would think that there were moats around their business. And some of that's also driven by the increasing customer expectations. I just mentioned Amazon. Amazon's created this one button, get everything you want. Don't worry about all of the logistical nightmare of challenges that it requires to get this thing to you, but we'll take care of all of that. And so this increasing customer expectation is driving this one button approach. I want to get started quickly. I don't want to worry about getting to ROI. I want to know that the return on investment is just going to be there. And so increasing customer expectations is driving software to more focus on the front office and not just the back office. Regulatory compliance, we see this again with global customers, GDPR over in EMEA, and then more recently, January 1st of this year, we saw it in California with CCPA, so California Consumer Privacy Act, which is essentially GDPR baked for the Americas. And so you're starting to see it come over here, regulatory and compliance. If this isn't in your software out of the gate, then you probably don't have enterprise-grade software. Next slide. So as we start to jump into, if that's a macro view, what's happening today and how's that setting up for the solutions that we're going to be bringing into the organization. COVID-19 obviously having a tremendous amount of impact and disruption on nearly everyone's business model. And so at Kofax, what we're trying to do is define our new normal. So we're trying to establish what exactly can we expect moving forward. And we want to make that as data-driven as possible. One way to do that is to start again with the highest level view and then drill down. One of the highest level views is, because being a global company, what do we see setting up? Who are those that are sort of a step or two ahead in terms of the curve, and what are the actions that they're taking? And so you can start to see the different regions of the world start to line up. So APAC will probably open up for business first, followed by Western Europe, and then the US, and then you start to see areas of say, India and the Philippines sort of lagging a little bit in terms of their lockdown and preventing the spread. So they're probably gonna have a few weeks on the tail end of this. But we can start to use this as a data-driven approach. On the next slide, what we wanna do then is, once we took sort of a high level, we wanted to say, okay, what typically happens? What do businesses do during a times of a crisis? And if you think back to the last crisis that we had during the global recession, the Great Recession of '09, there were a lot of companies that simply didn't make it through. There were other companies that really excelled. The platform, more innovative companies really started to come about. But at the end of the day, as most of us know, and there's a racing analogy here, that races are not won on the straightaway. They're won in the turn. So do you brake in the turn, or do you smartly position, clutch, and then accelerate? And so I think what we want to do here is help everybody on this call smartly position for the turn and then accelerate as we come out of this on the back end, and we will come out of this. This is basically showing that those that either brake or accelerate realize a movement in terms of their industry rankings. So what was really interesting, this is pulled from Gartner. I work very, very closely with Gartner, but 29% of companies during the 2008-2009 recession moved up or down an entire quartile in their industry rankings based on the actions they took in a crisis. And then you can see in the 2001, so the dot-com bubble bursting, and then 91, the S&L crisis. And then you see on the far left, in a typical non-recessionary year. So in the Great Recession, and most are sort of weighing this up there with the Great Recession in terms of what we're going to be going through, and data as recent as this morning is basically saying we're entering a recession in Q2, and 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP will, by definition, is a recession. So Q3 is substantially going to be negative GDP. But this is 5x a typical recessionary year in terms of the movement. So basically, this is the call to action. You are going to likely move up or down a quartile. The actions that you take now will dictate whether you go up or down. Next slide. 3 major stages to a crisis. This is Gartner's framework, just like they have the hype cycle for a lot of the innovation and technologies. They have this for a crisis, and this is what we're following at Kofax. And so what you can see in stage 1, which is where most of us find ourselves right now, starting to come out of stage 1, but nevertheless, most of us are in stage 1, where it's the initial reaction. How can we best respond? A lot of us have set up mitigation plans for our companies, and we've communicated with our customers, our partners, and with the general market. And we've started to define in stage 2 what the new normal is. So for Kofax, it may be some reduced resources, right? Because part of the mitigation plan was leaning the business to make sure that we can make it through the crisis. Having a more remote workforce, digitally engaging our customers, and that likely drives a new product, our new demand of our product mix. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is more online, mobile, and remote type solutions focused in cloud delivery. And then in stage 3 is when you start to see green shoots. So winning in the turn really comes to life in stage 3. So how do you accelerate growth? Everything that you really assessed and said, we're going to make decisions going left or right in the new normal, accelerate growth is when you're actually able to operationalize. Next slide. Gartner just pulsed, this was as recent as late last week, but they pulsed a global community cross-functional of, this was at the strategy leaders within a cross-functional global community. What are your greatest concerns? Number 1, demand destruction. We went from very quickly having a robust global economy to basically being locked down. And so demand destruction happened almost overnight. In a regular, leading into any one of the 3 recessions that we just looked at, you typically would have a tipping point where you started to see waning demand because there was some underlying structural issue, but that wasn't the case here. There was a health crisis that then went into an economic crisis, and that's quickly going to lead into other issues, and you start to see them playing out here. So as a result of this health issue that has led to a demand destruction problem, we now have a dislocated workforce. People that aren't acclimated to working in a remote environment. They didn't have their computer set up. They didn't have their webcam set up. They didn't have the connectivity to the business processes that they once were operating under. So maybe Joe and Sally were passing paper back and forth and able to talk to each other over cubicle walls. And now they're not able to do that. So how do they still produce in a remote environment? So workforce dislocation. Liquidity crisis. Again, this wasn't a liquidity crisis. That sort of came about as a result of the government saying stop working. The government saying stop working led to the demand destruction, which then led business to say we're entering a liquidity crisis. This same survey next month is likely going to advance from liquidity crisis into a solvency crisis. So you're quickly going to see this. So we have to be nimble in supply chain. Supply chain, again, regardless of vertical, supply chains have always been pretty fragile. Lots of different partners in the supply chain, a lot of variability in the supply chain. The smoothing factor in terms of how do we keep it together and how do we keep it operating is largely people through very heroic efforts. So how do you digitize more of the supply chain and create a frictionless environment? And that leads you to what will likely be an automation or digital experience transformation, more cloud infrastructure. Next slide. So if we think about the macro environment, a framework for dealing with it, what's going to be the impact on people? I'm big about being data-driven. So using intuition and experience, but coupling that with data so that we can sort of triangulate and fall on what is the right answer or as close to the right answer as possible. There's a really good nonpartisan from a nonprofit, the National Bureau of Economic Research report out there. The link is here. Would encourage you to take it for a test drive. It's maybe a 20-minute read, but it's really insightful. It takes a look at all of the recessions that we've had. So historically, all of the recessions we've had and the impact on the workforce. And what you will find is 88% of job loss over the last 3 recessions, which is when automation, AI has really been prevalent. So the last 3 recessions, over the last 3 recessions, 88% of the job loss has taken place in routine automatable occupations. Routine automatable occupations. And if you think about that, routine automatable occupations, the World Economic Forum starts to draw out what that looks like in terms of quantifying the impact. But take that study for a test drive. I think what you're going to find is that they talk about 3 different job polarizations, so 3 different types of job occupations. You have the upper management white collar, which is non-routine cognitive. So these are people that are really using their head on a daily basis, bouncing from one different meeting to another. It's not routine at all. So you have the white collar upper management. On the other end of the spectrum, you have blue collar. And the blue collar, they qualify as non-routine manual. But in the middle, you have what they call routine. And that's basically the middle class. So it is white collar that are making routine type decisions. And this is where automation is really hollowing out that middle class workforce. Because what you find in the study, again, through a very data-driven approach, will identify that that middle class, that routine work is going to be hollowed out, and you see the furloughs happening right now. that doesn't come back. 88% of those jobs are gone. That's when it happens. What replaces that, so decisions that everybody on this phone that is still on the hook to deliver for their organizations, our charge is to help our bosses, our boards and CEOs with a plan forward. And that plan forward largely is leaning on automation solutions to replace that capacity that is lost through the routine workforce that is no longer around. And what you'll find is that that routine workforce has to find themselves either upskilling into that non-routine cognitive, or they don't upskill and they find themselves in that non-routine manual. What the World Economic Forum does here is it starts to identify that there's an impact on the workforce, and that workforce can actually grow. The aggregate of those three personas can actually grow. The middle class will be hollowed out, but you can grow on the tails of it, and the aggregate total can be 58 million net new jobs. But there must be a transition plan from that middle to the tails. What you see here is basically part of that middle that you see hollowing out, identified by the type of job, the 75 million that will be filled by automation. Over on the right, the 133 million, so the tails, if you will, and a lot of this is focused on that non-routine cognitive tail, but 133 million will be filled by people, giving you a net add of 58 million jobs. But this again is this is a longer read, everything from the World Economic Forum is, but I encourage you to take a look at it. Next slide. Gartner and Forbes, they both tell the same, very, very similar sort of picture, and that is that 80% of RPA-centric automation, a lot of people are focused very much on the automation market, particularly RPA within the automation market, but 80% of the RPA-centric automation implementations will drive their value through complementary solutions by 2022. Meaning that to scale RPA, you need to first address data. How do we get data? How do we transform unstructured data into structured format? Because that's the starting point for RPA. So you start to see Gartner say that there are very specific technologies that are going to get us through this crisis. It's not just RPA. And we'll talk about the broader toolkit here in a minute. And then Forbes takes it a step further to say that this picture that you see here, this integration of the human workforce and automation and AI will largely be driven by assistive technologies. Those technologies that can really help people, augment people to be better. Basically, to take the routine work off of their desk, free them up to be more creative, have the space and time to actually think and innovate, and then use the technology to perform the more rudimentary tasks within their job. And at the end of the day, what we see this doing is driving greater purpose for the individual. And then at the same time, providing the capacity because people are being freed up from the lower value work, so providing the capacity for the organization. Next slide. But what's scary about it is only 17% of US adults as of 2019, late 2019, were classified as digitally ready. Next slide. How do we get there? Well, if we follow our savior, Steve Jobs, he will let you know time and time again, because you see it on LinkedIn every time you tap on it, that you've got to start with the experience and work backwards to the technology. Kofax is a very, as soon as I came over a year and a half ago, I said, we're going to shift from being a product company to being a customer-led company. We are not a product-led company anymore. We're going to understand what the experience needs to be. Therefore, we established our advisory board that we just had today. And we're going to back into the technology and what the technology needs to look like, what it needs to deliver. And we're going to be more mindful of tech trends, because these tech trends are out there because this is the way people are working. And so this is the future of work. Gartner, their #1 tech trend for 2020 is called hyperautomation, which is essentially defined, and you see it here, but it's the connective tissue. It's bringing together people, technology, and how they work into a toolkit to remove that friction from operations. On the next slide, what you see is that another analyst, global analyst group, actually put a framework to how those tools could be deployed in an operating environment. And they start in the middle with their discover, data, and automate. And then they say underneath that in order to discover which processes you should likely automate, and then begin to ingest and cleanse and structure the data before you automate it, that you on the bottom there, you have to address if there are humans in the loop at particular points along this process. And so you have to have an orchestration layer. You have to have a BPM, a business process management, or an orchestration, a process orchestration component to this platform to make it work. And on the top, what you see is analytics throughout the process, as well as customer engagement, more focused on the front office customer experience as opposed to the back office productivity. So all of this coming together to really provide you the ability to achieve hyper automation. And on the next slide, this is the Kofax Intelligent Automation Platform. So 5 pillars of technology that we brought together to help our customers really be able to work like tomorrow, today. Meaning to be able to hyper automate and achieve that rapid return on investment through a single platform of technologies that allows you to do, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. On the next slide, we overlay our platform in the yellow callouts here against the framework for achieving hyper automation. And what you'll see in the discovery, having process discovery built into our platform, so helping our customers identify where they should likely automate, being able then to ingest data, so bring in data omni-channels, whether it's coming in through social media channels, through scanned PDFs, through paper-based documents that need to be digitized first, but being able to ingest the data. And where you have unstructured data, being able to transform that using our proprietary, so patented AI to transform the unstructured data into structured formats, so that way we can begin the automation process. Using largely RPA to perform task automation, but realizing that humans need to be in the loop, cases need to be managed, and it's likely dynamic case management given the complex operating environments. But you also have a distinct need for orchestration because you have a lot of different CRMs, ERPs, different systems to include legacy mainframes that you need to connect data to. And so that human in the loop down here, orchestration, is a key component of our platform around process orchestration. On the top, what you see is our embedded insights provides the analytical capability. And then around micro business apps, so engaging customers more smartly with automation as opposed to people. How do you bring in the form of electronic signature, customer communications management tools? And so this is how our platform really helps our customers work like tomorrow today by achieving a state of hyper automation. On the next slide, what you see is sort of the latest Gartner rankings. And Gartner ranked, and this came out in December of 2019, one of the more recent reports, and it ranked 18 automation vendors across 3 primary use cases. So they really dug into the technologies. This wasn't a marketing campaign. They dug into the technologies, and the 3 different use cases were attended automation, unattended automation, and assisting the knowledge worker. 3 very distinct use cases are business problems with many use cases underneath each one of those 3. And Kofax did okay. We did okay. We're the only platform to score in the top 3 across all 3 of the use cases, and we scored highest in AI, so embedded AI, which is our machine learning and natural language processing, primarily focused on that unstructured data transformation. And the next slide, which I believe is the last slide, which I think is extremely relevant to what Chad and Geoff are going to step you through, which is document processing. How do you really intelligently process these documents? So that doesn't just mean using aggressive AI technologies, but smartly using them in a manner that allows you to achieve a lot of value in a short amount of time. And that includes implementation. So it's not a 12-month implementation to be able to finally have intelligent document processing capability. But nevertheless, some of the top strengths were identified here. This is Everest. They came out with this one last week, I believe. Kofax, this is the core. You saw in the hyper automation framework that it really sits right in the middle and is the critical capability. If you can't address the unstructured data, you're going to struggle with any automation project, because if you look across any of the analysts, they will tell you about 80% of an enterprise's data is unstructured data. So if you don't address that, which is the more difficult thing to address, but if you don't address that, then you're rarely going to scale your automation and probably likely never achieve hyper automation or that value that I know all of us are seeking. And with that, I believe we're going to transition to solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That was awesome. Tons of good data and analysis there. Yeah, so Chad and I are going to jump into and talk a little bit more about what is it that we can do now, right? And when I say now, I literally mean now, right? What can we spend, the rest of the week and next week jumping into and really looking at to figure out what we're going to do today and tomorrow. So I think right now, everyone's pretty focused on the next 24 hours, the next 2 days, maybe the next week. For the most part, most companies aren't even thinking about, July and August because, we don't know what that's going to look like. But, we want to make decisions now that are good decisions for the future. Now is an opportunity to look at some of the projects that we've put on the back burner because we've been able to by using our current infrastructure, but now that infrastructure is failing us, so we need to modify it in order to deal with, this particular crisis. The good news, though, is that, while focusing on solutions that we can deploy rapidly, that doesn't mean that we have to only focus on solutions that are, one-off wastes. What it means is that we want to make sure that we're finding solutions that we can get that rapid deployment of, but that we can build on top of. So that as we get out of this, we're able to gain efficiencies, right? Increase the bottom line by, reducing back office expenses, and also be prepared for the future because, right now, we don't know, what that looks like exactly, right? We don't know if, there's a seasonal coronavirus. We're just not sure. But again, what we are sure of is that, increasing efficiency in our businesses, is definitely always a key priority, especially when you look at, some of Chris's metrics. If 70% of enterprises are going to be, really, embracing this technology, you don't want to be that 30% that isn't, or you're going to get left in the dust, right? You want to be that organization that goes up in a Gartner quadrant, not the one that drops. So, it's very important that we're taking this opportunity, not only to be reactionary and to keep our operations running, but also to build upon it in the future. So, obviously, speed of deployment is, extremely critical, especially for those organizations that presently have paper-based workflows. We're talking to companies on a daily basis since this whole thing started. That's passing invoices around an office for manual approval, that's doing that sort of stuff. And, it's probably been on your roadmap for a while, knowing that you need to get rid of it, but it just wasn't critical, right? We all have priorities. So, for those organizations where it may not have been a priority for you in the past, it probably is now. So, we're definitely want to look at, the speed of the deployment. And of course, we're always looking at costs, right? We don't just want to, burn money. Ultimately you want to see some ROI on anything you do. Now that ROI might have some different factors than it did historically. Especially as, we start discussing the, human life, right? And having people going into offices and all that is dangerous. So, we want to minimize that as much as possible right now. And then, naturally we have I guess we're at about 8 years now of having this constant cloud versus, on-prem, discussion where, it was on-prem was like the enterprise standard not that long ago. And then it's only been within those last 5-8 years that we've really been started talking, and probably more like 5 that we've really started talking about cloud-based. And cloud-based kind of comes in two forms, right? In enterprise software, we are really good at, confusing what's cloud and what's SaaS or software as a service, right? So, you have technology that might be cloud-based because it's deployed on AWS or Azure, and then you have, true SaaS solutions, which generally, is more of a multi-tenant type thing. Either way, either of these options do not require you to have, bodies in a data center touching server blades. That's probably the most important for the immediate now. But, there's the second, which is overall software maintenance and weighing the benefits of having a true SaaS solution versus a, kind of cloud-based on-prem solution, right? Which is that AWS server. So one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on, because, at RPI, we do tons of, back office, solution integrations, is, these physical documents, right? So I brought up invoices because we see a ton of that. So that whole, P2P process can be very paper ridden, right? So from the original CapEx to actually, getting an invoice cut or a check cut from an approved invoice, we need to start looking at that. So with our clients, one of the big things that we're talking to them about, since we have been for a long time, is starting to get these documents away from paper to begin with, right? So having some very, very strong messaging around, do not mail us an invoice. If you mail us an invoice, it's going to get paid late. Don't do it. Now's a good time to do that, because we need to push that message anyways. Because when you do implement intelligent capture, AP automation solution, you don't want paper invoices. You're going to get way better hit rates by having PDFs come in via email than you are if you're scanning these paper invoices, right? So it's a good time to start, getting that messaging out. And that's something we can help you with, right? What exactly the cadence of that looks like, but we want to start getting that messaging out, saying, we do not mail us paper invoices. Just don't do it. It's costing you money, and to mail them, and it's likely that we're not going to be able to get them paid, nearly as quickly. And some of that messaging too, if you are utilizing an intelligent capture solution, can involve that, right? There's no reason that you can't, tell your vendors, hey, our AP automation solution will read your PDF invoices way faster, so that we can process them quicker and get you paid. So, that can be part of that messaging. The next thing to that AP automation is that, we're going to capture those invoices automatically, so that you don't have headcount that's sitting there and grabbing emails and pulling attachments out of emails, right? You want to put a system in place that's reading those emails, that's pulling the invoices out of them, that's getting them into the AP automation solution, and intelligently capturing the data off of them, so that then we can feed that data into the ERP system, and we can cut checks. And then, the other big piece to all of this is that workflow, right? So I talked about the invoice approvals. We don't have the option of passing paper around offices that are closed, and it's not great practice anyways, right? It's pretty inefficient. With that being said, it also, hurts the whole ability to have a rigorous approval process, because if you pass the invoice to whoever you think you should pass it to, versus having it go through a proper approval hierarchy, you don't know whether or not it's actually going down the proper approval chain. So we want to get a workflow solution, in place for that. You may already own a workflow solution, like OnBase, ImageNow, one of those types of softwares. Or what Chad will talk about too is the SaaS application that we work with a lot, ReadSoft Online, also has that workflow solution, inside of it also. And, we can really rapidly deploy that, because it is that latter, cloud that I was talking about, which is the true SaaS, multi-tenant environment. Can be rapidly deployed, doesn't need maintenance. But I'll leave that for Chad. And so outside of telling people, hey, email us in these invoices and email us in these documents, the most ideal world is that we increase from the 20% structured documents, right? Chris was talking about 80% of everything is unstructured. Let's try to get more of that structured also wherever we can, right? And that's where we want to use, fillable PDF forms, and we want to use e-form solutions, right? And then, of course, for signature, we want to make sure that we're using some sort of digital signature solution as well. So those are all things that we need as part of this also. to maximize, how efficient we're getting. So, there's really, two main ways to eliminate manual processes. One is you reduce them internally through use of intelligent process automation, right? So generally what that means to us is it means, robotic process automation, and it means, more niche software suites, such as AP automation solutions like ReadSoft Online, or Kofax Total Agility, right? Although, we oftentimes use Kofax Total Agility for accounts payable, but one of the awesome things about that solution is that while we have accounts payable set up, built, ready to go, you can then use Kofax Total Agility for anything. But I'll get off that tangent. But at any rate, so number one is that, right? How can we automate internally? And then the second way to eliminate manual processes, are to outsource those non-value added processes, right? So in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking to a lot of our clients about outsourcing check runs, right? Check runs require people to go into an office, touch stuff, be there, see other people, isn't a value added activity and can be outsourced for pretty inexpensive. So back to our cloud conversation, right? We can't have stuff sitting on blades in data centers anymore for obvious reasons. So now is definitely a time to look at that, right? You want to look at these solutions and decide, A, do I want to keep it in a data center? B, is it something that I move to an AWS or Azure server? Or C, do I want to replace this with a SaaS solution that I don't have to worry about, that isn't a problem, right? And so, that's where we need to evaluate everything, based on, what is it that we're trying to solve for, right? So like Chris was saying, don't start with the software, start with what the business objective is, and then look at it. So, with a lot of our client base on the Invoice side, right, we've already seen over the last several years, people moving to, Infor Cloud Suite, right, with version 11. We, have seen people or in organizations that are moving some of their Kofax solution to some of the, more multi-tenant environments that they offer. Or, one of our favorites is ReadSoft Online, because we're able to stand it up so quickly, get you up and running with it for your accounts payable processing, so that you're gaining, some efficiency now, but more importantly, eliminating paper in a couple of weeks. And then, we can build on top of it for the more aggressive automation. And then, of course, RPI has a whole suite of solutions that kind of play the middleman between all of these different applications, right? So we connect the various Kofax applications with the ERPs. We connect your ECM systems with the ERP. So the Yoga software suite comes into play there, so that any gaps that you have in these processes, we can connect it all together. Chad, with that being said, I think I probably took up more time than I was supposed to, so I'll push it over to you.
You're fine, Geoff. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris, also. So as we've kind of started from very high level, started whittle down to specific use cases here, we've kind of landed here at the base here of AP invoice automation specifically, and what we can do, for AP invoice processing and help us in our new normal. So just to connect with maybe what a current state people are looking at today with invoices, manual data entry. You're opening mail, have an invoice open, you're sitting there hand keying all the data, or if you have invoices that need approval, you're sending them out and waiting for someone to respond back to your email and give you some geocoding information, or they're writing it on the invoice and you have to go pick it up from them because it's behind it's underneath a pile of other pieces of paper on their document, and you're still just having to deal with paper invoices and filing cabinets, and that's just not going to be workable in today's new normal, where people are being forced to stay home, having to come in shifts, and not having that day-to-day interaction of being able to just lean over the cubicle and pass a piece of paper off. So, accounts payable automation is, for invoices specifically, what this involves is, the capturing of those invoices, whether it's from an email, whether it's being scanned, taking that document and extracting all of the data off of it intelligently, using top of the line AI, machine learning, natural language processing to figure out what these data points are. Validate that data automatically with your backend business systems and provide some automated exception workflow. So automatically, if an invoice comes in from a vendor that doesn't exist in your system, until automation can handle that and say, oh, this isn't a vendor, it needs to go to this person, or oh, this PO is closed, it needs to go to this person. And on top of the exception and workflow routing, you have your approval routing, based on various factors, whether it's by vendor, by department, by cost of the invoice. You can have configurable routing rules to get those invoices automatically to the right person in a digital format that they can approve without having to worry about handing this piece of paper off to someone. Storing these invoices digitally, whether it's integrating with an existing ECM or using the storage that the platform that you're using automation on has, and then sending this information off to the ERP for processing. So why invoice processing in the cloud? We've talked about the benefits of SaaS already, but really just able to deploy rapidly, lower cost per invoice, allows you to embrace a mobile strategy also. And with the SaaS solutions, it's much easier to get out to your users who are at home. You're not having to set up VPNs or RDPs or anything to on-premise solutions. You have something that's already exposed out there that we can connect using single sign-on and to your existing Active Directory or your existing identity management software to make sure that that has people get access and that are supposed to get access. So we've mentioned Kofax, ReadSoft Online a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. As adaptive self-learning, cognitive capture, workflow automation, visibility to all the invoices in process, ERP integration, and you get a low total cost of ownership and fast ROI. So again, we've talked about the AI-based data extraction. We have a multi-tenant AI learning-based engine that will do the verification, validation, which is all configurable from organization to organization, but it has most of the invoice fields that you utilize day to day out of the box already configured for validation. It'll check for duplicates, errors, any of those type of business rules that are commonly associated with processing invoices will come out of the box with ReadSoft Online. We talked about the importance of workflow automation. ReadSoft Online has a tool for automating workflows, all different types of settings and triggers and conditional routing that can be developed within this tool specific for your organization. And again, end-to-end process visibility for management staff and users of the AP process. We can see where all these invoices coming to the system are, so you have the ability to understand, if they're assigned to users waiting to be approved, waiting for data verification, if they're rejected. You have a full kind of eagle-eye view of where all your documents are in process, so you don't have to wonder whose desk they're on anymore, because you know whose inbox they're in from this process. And then the last great thing about ReadSoft Online is that it has analytics out of the box. So from you have these great dashboards that show you exactly how long it's taking to process invoices, how many invoices you're processing, how well you're processing invoices. So it gives you this great top level management type view of your invoice process, so that you don't have to question where or how long things are taking. This is strategic, when it comes to talking vendors and agreeing to terms and dynamic discounting. The time it takes to process an invoice end to end is a very important metric that this helps you realize. So, this implementation we talked about, we can get this up and running in 3 to 5 weeks, depending on scope and logistics. But really header level intelligent capture, get your approval and coding workflow in place, an ERP integration, and the analytics dashboard that we talked about. This is the strategic investment that we're talking about. We want to make sure that we have something immediately available today to address the new normal that we're dealing with. But this is going to be a long-term go-forward solution for you too. Say you have to continue to remote staff your AP department, or this is going to allow you to enable that. All right, I kind of sped through my portion here, so we only had a few minutes left. I wanted to leave some times for questions. Um, Mike, do you know if we have any questions so far?
Yeah, so and just a quick reminder to everyone on the line that if you do have questions, now would be the time. You can enter those into the questions pane on your go-to panel. The first question we have came in was asking how we see maybe conversational AI fitting into some of the processes or solutions we mentioned earlier, or even maybe AP.
Yeah, so happy to say from Kofax sort of what we're doing. So conversational AI. Before I left Deloitte Consulting about 2 years ago to come over to Kofax, I ran for Deloitte Consulting the U.S. public sector practice, automation practice, and it was robotic process automation, blockchain, and conversational AI. So I'm a big fan of conversational AI. Coming over to Kofax, clearly saw the interplay between automation and conversational AI, meaning that a lot of the automation is intended to ingest data, process that data, but then communicating that data or allowing somebody to query the data doesn't need to be through traditional means, very manual, touching the keyboard. It can be through conversational AI. And so we built integration. We actually have it out on our community right now. We call it Smart Hub. It's our online Amazon where we've taken all of the assets that we built internally as well as with our partners like RPI, and we've staged them out there. And so there is a conversational AI and Kofax platform, intelligent automation platform connector for conversational AI, and it's with a company called Cognigy, Cognigy. They were a 2018 Gartner Cool Vendor, just got their second round of VC funding, second headquarters set up in San Francisco, so you can see where they're going. But yeah, conversational AI is definitely a much more efficient way. And basically in this new world, and I just saw the newest stat come out while we were on the call here, 74% of CFOs intend to keep their remote workforces remote when we get back to business as normal. So that's a lot higher than what I thought it would be. It could be a knee-jerk reaction, but nevertheless, they are seeing that people are stepping up and being extremely productive in a new remote environment. So why bring them back into the office? And I think a lot of that is because they are leveraging these digital solutions to remove the friction, Chad, like you said, between Joe and Sally having to actually communicate and hand off work between each other. They're using things like ReadSoft Online to digitally sort of transform the way they do AP. So conversational AI, big, especially within areas where there's lots of data, such as AP.
Yeah, I could see something like a chat bot replacing almost a supplier portal.
Yeah.
Instead of having to call into an AP customer service center or log into a supplier portal, you're having a chat bot kind of handle those AP inquiries that you often get from suppliers.
Interesting. I like it. Hadn't thought of that.
Great. Next question that came in. So we talked a lot today about creating structure from unstructured content, but recognizing that invoices as a case study, invoices are pretty structured. Those are pretty easy to work with. How would an implementation work with sort of non-structured processes or non-structured documents? Example that was given was medical records.
Yeah, so invoices would fall along the line of, what I would call semi-structured, right? And it definitely depends on what exactly you want to do with it. I see from the question you're kind of asking about a timeline also. So I think, there's lots of stuff we can be talking about, right? So ReadSoft Online in particular isn't going to be a fit for medical records. It's accounts payable focused. But in terms of being able to take data from unstructured documents, I mean, that's definitely something that we could do inside of a solution like Kofax Total Agility, right? That's more something that we would do there and will probably be more of a custom workflow. But that's where, we can use that super powerful engine that Kofax has built over the last, I don't know how many years, that, has that, natural language processing, and, more of that machine learning where we can take these documents and over time we can learn where to look at stuff while also going back to basics And for the more high volume documents, generally what we would look to do is still some level of scripting, so that we can just, maximize how quickly we learn the documents and can start pulling information off of them. But then of course there's also another level, which is, trying to take those documents. So in regards to medical records, we've had this conversation actually quite frequently, because a lot of times medical records are coming from all over the place, right? And you have no control of what it looks like. So with stuff like this, what we might look to is to actually take some of those documents and get them in an electronic form instead, right? So rather than just having information flowing at us from everywhere possible, anywhere that we can, we want to implement a form-based solution, right? So obviously when it's, patients that we're admitting, that's, pretty easy to push a form on them. When the records are coming from other clinics, that type of thing, if, you're someone that holds some power, then you might be requesting that as those records come in, they're accompanied by a form as well, so that we're able to more easily process them. And then, the other way that we tackled unstructured documents is by having, some sort of dictionary, right? So if we know, for instance, who the patient, who our patients are that we're going to be getting medical records for, we can, utilize some of the Kofax technology so that as we're reading that document, we're looking for specific names, right? So that, as we see it, even if it's, handwritten, so we don't have an exact match, we're able to say, oh, do we have that first and last name somewhere else? Okay, yes, that's probably a hit.
Yep, spot on. I would add two quick things. One is that Cerner uses Kofax Total Agility. They're one of our biggest customers here in North America, and they're actually on our advisory board as well. And they use Kofax Total Agility for revenue cycle management, which includes patient onboarding. And so it's being done today. Happy to share that with RPI and however you want to set up a follow-on with whoever asked the question. But it's already being done today, leveraging Kofax Total Agility. Jeff, to your exact point, so Kofax Total Agility is three components really. It's capture, it's transformation, and it's BPM. Amped up on steroids, but essentially it's those three technologies converged into one platform, which allows you to ingest, right, the capture piece with the OCR built in. So ingest the medical record, and then transform, use the transformation. So transform using the AI algorithms that unstructure, so just a bunch of sentences on the medical record, into machine readable language. And then you can feed the automated workflow, the dynamic case management, putting humans in the loop, so the collaboration, building those work queues, generating forms based on the data. And so Kofax Total Agility, to your point, Jeff, is really, really powerful, can do a lot of things. Cerner uses it for exactly this.
Yep, and I'll reach out, or Chad will reach out, and we'll follow up with you on that also, so we can further the conversation to the exact use case that you're thinking of.
Those are all the questions. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Chris, we really appreciate you joining us today. I think this was awesome. You obviously have a wealth of information on this. And definitely just want everyone to know, that please feel free to reach out. You'll receive a follow-up email from us. If you have any questions, want to talk about specific use cases, we're, definitely here to talk about what we can do right now, in the short term, get through the next, I don't know, weeks, months, whatever, probably months, and then as we, get, I don't want to say back to normal, I want to say, as we get to our new normal, we can continue to build on that, and in general, just increase efficiency, and, be better prepared for if and when there's a next time. So I don't know, Chad, Chris, if you guys have anything to add.
No, I think this was great. Thanks for having me on. Just hope everybody stays safe, remains healthy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.
Take care.
Bye.